Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the chant. Israel has stolen our land, now they're stealing our heroes. That mantra has become a rallying call for Muslims throughout the world. There are those who will jump at any opportunity to attack Israel. It stems from true, unadulterated hatred. It is as unfair as it is typical and commonplace in the Muslim world itself. Most often, the cry is leveled at Israel for actions involving Palestinians. Of late, the arena of the Muslim hatred and vertupetude and its speech has widened. Now it involves Hollywood. Paramount Pictures has announced that Israeli actress Gal Gadot, who became a worldwide household name after starring in the movie Wonder Woman, will now star as Cleopatra in a remake of the 1963 blockbuster originally starring Elizabeth Taylor. And the Muslim world is not pleased. The response to the announcement about Gadot's role has been met with anger and severe criticism.
On your knees.
The choice of an actress has been decried in many of the Muslim world's countries and many of their leaders, especially in their media. 57 years ago, when Elizabeth Taylor was cast in the role, the Muslim world had a similar response. Is it that life is imitating art, or is art imitating life? Either way, it shows little progress in the actions or thinking of large swaths of the Muslim world. And that is one of the most crippling strictures of the Muslim world itself, and they have imposed it upon themselves. For many moviegoers, the 1963 movie put Egypt on the map. It was the most expensive movie ever to be made at that time, until that time. Elizabeth Taylor earned an unheard $1 million for her role. Her costume wardrobe alone cost $200,000. Egypt was glorified, and each shot was a Hollywood spectacular. And yet, despite the unpaid publicity they received courtesy of 20th Century Fox, Egypt banned the screening and put Liz Taylor on a no-fly list. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't born Jewish. The star converted to Judaism in 1957 to marry the famous popular singer Eddie Fisher. After her conversion, the megastar became a major supporter of Israel, buying a $100,000 Israel bond, let's say, for instance, raising over $1 million for Israel in Israel fundraising events. Historically, Cleopatra was not actually Egyptian. That's important to know. She was Ptolemaic. Her father was from Macedon. Her mother, unknown exactly, was probably Cleopatra V Taraphania, the king's wife, was possibly his half-sister. There's no doubt she, Cleopatra, was born in Egypt. But unlike in Judaism, where the lineage is traced through the mother, in the other cultures, it is traced through the father. It is clear to historians that Cleopatra could not have been Egyptian, if for no other reason, that she was a general in the army of Alexander the Great, in his conquest over none other than Egypt. She conquered Egypt. Her name, Cleopatra, means glory to my father. Kleos in Greek means glory. Patra means father. Cleopatra was a tremendous leader. Years and years before the movie, her reputation was secured in all of our minds by William Shakespeare and his classic work, Antony and Cleopatra. By the way, that's without an H. Antony and Cleopatra. That monumental work described Cleopatra as a powerful seductress, a manipulator who achieved her national, political, and economic goals through the power of her intellect and her charm. The real-life love triangle between Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, and Cleopatra was the stuff classics are made of. Even King Herod the Great played a role in that relationship. Assuming the throne at the age of 18, Cleopatra was one of the most powerful women in history. Some historians argue that her beauty was overstated. Coins that were minted with Cleopatra's face depict her with a hooked nose. Not very attractive at all. She's also depicted often in male dress, looking as a king would look, not a beautiful queen. One particular coin depicts her and her large nose on one side, and on the other side, there's an eagle and a lightning bolt with the inscription, Queen Cleopatra. All these things are important in terms of understanding the totality of the character itself and understanding just how powerful she was. There's no disputing that Cleopatra was the most powerful, and her skills and her intellect and her charm was more powerful over her beauty. T.S. Eliot identifies the tension between Cleopatra, the seductress, the temptress, and Cleopatra, the strong, powerful woman. Eliot believed that focusing on her sexuality diminished her power. Shakespeare, Elizabeth Taylor, and Gal Gadot all focus on the beauty of Cleopatra. T.S. Eliot focuses on her power. Both perspectives are probably equal part truth and lore. Cleopatra did what she had to do to accomplish what she wanted. The character Cleopatra was, is, and will probably always be enthralling. She was able to rise to the level as a peer of Julius Caesar. Obviously, Egypt wants to claim Cleopatra for herself. She ruled Egypt as a Roman leader. So Rome claims her also. Women claim her. Almost everyone claims her as theirs. In today's media world, Cleopatra is stunning. Our images of her are nothing like her images on the minted coins during her reign. Our images are of Liz Taylor and Gal Gadot. In the end, Egypt was stunned by the response to the movie starring Elizabeth Taylor. Absolutely stunned, to the point where Egypt was mentioned in the movie literally 122 times. The movie earned 4 Oscars, and Egypt did the turnabout. Despite Liz Taylor's love of Israel, even her visit to Israel, Egypt lifted their ban on the movie. It remains to be seen if the modern world would be swayed as Egypt was in 1963-64. We will see if Cleopatra's skills still apply today.
You are now dismissed.
I've also been thinking not only about tensions between Arabs and Jews, I've also been thinking about harmony between Arabs and Jews. This is sort of an interesting concept because, remember, the United Arab Emirates and Israel has created this great relationship. So Ahmad al-Mansouri, a musician from the United Arab Emirates, played Israel's national anthem Hatikva on his oud, an 11-string guitar-like musical instrument popular in the Arab world. He taped his rendition of the anthem of Hatikva and posted it on YouTube. Al-Mansouri was paying tribute to the normalization, to the agreement between the Jewish state, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates, UAE. Yet, this is important, it got spectacular publicity. Ynet easily tracked him down. They spoke to him on air and about the agreement, but also about writing and playing Hatikva, the tribute to the significance of the music in shaping a world that was built on unity and peace. In the interview, al-Mansouri said that he would love to play together with an Israeli musician, on air, hosted by the interviewer. The Israeli newscaster said that he would arrange it and taught the United Arab Emirates musician the Yiddish Hebrew word shidduch, which means a match. He'll make the shidduch, he says. Al-Mansouri told Ynet, and I'm quoting here, "Once I heard about the agreement between the UAE and Israel, I decided to play the national anthem of Israel on the oud, to send a message of peace between the two countries. It's a dream for me, and I hope one day to visit Israel and play in public there," unquote. Speaking about Israeli music, al-Mansouri said that he learned it from YouTube. He said he likes it and added, "In my opinion, Israeli music is very beautiful. It is similar to Arabic music in a different taste," unquote. This is just one example of how people, regular people, not famous people, are expressing their excitement about the new horizons opening between Israel and the Arab world. On YouTube again, and you can search these on your own, it's actually fascinating. I saw another example. People driving in a car on a busy highway in the UAE are happily singing the Israeli national anthem. All the while, imprinted on the screen are the words, United Arab Emirates. It's remarkable. Israeli and UAE artists have already jointly recorded and posted songs. One of those songs, when I looked at it this week, had already received 1.1 million clicks. The song is now trending and has gone viral. 1.1 million clicks of a song between Israeli and United Arab Emirates artists. Going back to the Ynet interview, the newscaster commented that this agreement seems so natural. He's right. It doesn't seem forced at all. Actually, from October 17th to October 20th, a team of Americans, headed by U.S. Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, spent time in Israel and the UAE in order to further assist in commercial products that will benefit all the parties involved. This is a prime example of the famous quote, "A rising tide lifts all boats." This expression, by the way, is often attributed to John F. Kennedy in a speech he gave in 1963. But his speechwriter, Ted Sorensen, said that while he did write it for JFK's speech, it is not original to either of them. Sorensen borrowed the phrase, "A rising tide raises all boats," from a report by the Economic Council of New England. Partnerships, that's what it's all about. Coming up, points of view. First up is a column from Ynet. It discusses a double standard of Palestinian leadership, using the Israeli hospitals when they need it, but denying their people the same services. In this case, Saeb Erekat, the chief negotiator, the most innermost circle advisor to both Arafat and Abu Mazen, contracted COVID. Last year, Erekat had a blood transplant in the United States, and now because he required hospitalization to treat his COVID, this senior and very public Palestinian personality was taken from his home in Jericho to Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. He was not taken to a PA hospital, neither was he taken to a Jordanian hospital. He went to Hadassah. He didn't go to a European hospital, and he didn't go to the United States. The PA leadership knows that they have a problem. They went so far as to explain that he was in the Tel Aviv hospital. They later updated the report and said it was a Jerusalem hospital. They added a caveat that it was the closest hospital to Jericho, where Erekat lives. This Ynet column was printed and written by Elior Levy on October 18th, 2020. It's entitled, "Erekat's Hospitalization in Israel Exposes PA's Hypocrisy." The subheadline, analysis. Despite Ramallah cutting security and defense ties with Jerusalem many months ago, stranding many Palestinians in need of advanced medical aid, it seems the rules are different when it comes to senior Fatah officials. Levy begins. The Palestinian Authority is very much aware of the embarrassment and backlash it might face following the hospitalization of senior PLO official Saeb Erekat in Israel, who was in serious condition after contracting coronavirus. The decision to rush him to an Israeli hospital is especially tenuous given the total lack of diplomatic ties between Ramallah and Jerusalem, and the criticism leveled by the PA at the UAE and Bahrain over their normalization deals with Israel, in addition to warming relations between Fatah and the Hamas terror group. Erekat, and this is me speaking here, is probably the most identifiable of all PA leadership, all of their officials. I have on numerous times appeared opposite him on air, back in the days when the media was actually interested in hearing two sides of a story. Erekat's health must be in serious trouble. There's no question about it. Levy continues. In addition to the fact that Erekat's family requested for him to be transferred to an Israeli hospital might serve as an indication that his condition is worse than what was being told to the public. The Jerusalem hospital spokesperson said Sunday evening that Erekat was in serious but stable condition. He needed a high-flow oxygen support and was being treated in an intensive care unit for coronavirus patients following pleas by the PA officials to the Israeli government and Hadassah management. One has to realize that going to an Israeli hospital is a real snub to the rest of the Palestinian public. It's a very revealing move, and it has to be understood that way politically, not health-wise. Levy writes, Erekat's hospitalization has exposed that not everything is as it seems. Despite Ramallah's ending almost all military and civilian coordination with Israel, urgent cases of appear to be an exception. Levy continues, nonetheless, the cutting of ties has significantly complicated things for ordinary Palestinians. Those from the West Bank or the Gaza Strip requiring advanced medical treatment in Israel are stopped from receiving it, even if such services are not available in the PA. Ramallah, for its part, says that the Palestinians receiving these treatments only bring more money to Israel's hospitals and HMOs. But it seems that when it comes to Palestinian officials, especially as senior as Erekat, all ideology goes out the window, and receiving help from Israel is fair game. Next up is a column from the New York Times. It's from the Sunday magazine. It's from a section called The Ethicist. The weekly column is written by New York University professor of philosophy, Kwame Anthony Appiah. The Ethicist is an advice column, like Dear Abby, but not exactly. Readers pose questions that are personal. They all have ethical and moral bases for them. And then the ethicist responds, giving an understanding of what's going on and giving an ethical principle. This question appeared online on October 13th and in print October 18th. The question is entitled, I'm Jewish and don't identify as white. Why must I check that box? The anonymous questioner asked this question in far more detail, but nonetheless, it's very important for us to understand and see exactly what's going on. But that's the essence of the question. The title gives it the whole thing. Given the charged moments of politics today, the ethicist answers it very well without really pulling punches. The ethicist responds by using historical fact and presenting the problem with the group stereotypes, such as race, and delineating how imprecise they can be as descriptions. The ethicist writes, like Jacob and Esau, the racial designations white and black were born twins. In this country, since the colonial era, they have functioned to turn human beings from a wide range of societies on two continents into two vast assemblages. The highly diverse peoples who inhabited the Americas before the Europeans or Africans were, in the same process, lumped together as Indians. As ideas about race, as supposedly biological categories solidified through the 19th century, all three groups increasingly came to be thought of as races. And when migration from the rest of the world brought more peoples from elsewhere, they were fitted into this system, too, with certain modifications, notably when the United States decided to let in and then keep out workers from the Far East. There are two big problems with the way our American race concept developed. First, the race idea presupposed that people who share ancestry and some of the physical characteristics that go with it are much more similar than they actually are. And correspondingly, that people of disparate ancestries are much more different from one another than they actually are. Once grouped together in this way, people were easily regarded not as individuals with particular virtues and vices, but as representatives of types. The ethicist points out, and this is important, the elements that are involved in the errors of defining anyone by race, and how groups are not universal, and how stereotypes are totally wrong. He begins to explain, and that his understanding that, given the family history of the questioner, the person asking the question, Jews are white, but would never have been considered white by their white persecutors and murderers throughout history. The ethicist concludes by suggesting that you can use your white skin to fight racism. The ethicist writes, in the current conjuncture, what's more, there's something to be said for accepting that you are willy-nilly white, because you can use your whiteness as an anti-racist instrument. Here's one kind of privilege that white people have in our society. When you point to acts of anti-black racism, you're less likely than a black person to be suspected of being hypersensitive or self-interested. You can also speak up in all-white settings when people venture anti-black remarks. In the struggle against racism, it sometimes helps if you don't have skin in the game. An excellent piece by the ethicist, and recognizing that we as Jews are not the same. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 4 cartoons today. Actually, 3 cartoons and a picture with a caption. First up is a picture of Anne Frank. It's entitled, "The Law is Not Our Moral Compass." The caption reads, "The people who hid Anne Frank were breaking the law. The people who killed her were following it." Simple, direct, and powerful. Remember it because I'm going to deal with that as the piquante piece at the end. Next up is a depiction of Israeli PM Bibi Netanyahu and his family driving a car. The Netanyahus, Bibi, Sarah, and their son Yair, who loves media attention, are in one car. On the road are his political nemesis, Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked. And they are in the red convertible, speeding quickly and overtaking the Netanyahus. The caption has Yair, their son, saying, "Dad, they're overtaking us from the right." Overtaking is the British expression, passing. Which is a brilliant and funny piece. Yes, Bibi is dropping in the polls, and Bennett and Shaked are neck and neck with him. Third up is a cartoon by Steve Greenberg. It depicts the Ayatollah of Iran attacking Israel through its proxies. They are Iraqi Shiites, Syrian proxies, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas. The artistic metaphor Greenberg chose is the Ayatollah's turban, which is unfurling and sailing through and binding together all of his proxies. The last cartoon is a snake, and actually it's 2 cartoons because I have to deal with where it came from. It's a snake cut into pieces. On the body of the snake is written, "The Islamic State." In other words, it's been destroyed. The Islamic State has been totally destroyed. This snake, though, is a riff on the famous cartoon attributed to Benjamin Franklin. Ben Franklin, yes, of the original U.S. colonies, disunified and depicted as a cut-up snake. The original cartoon was published in the Pennsylvania Gazette on May 9th, 1754. The caption on it reads, "Join or Die." This is believed to be the very first political cartoon ever published. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Saturday night in Jerusalem, protests take place outside the official residence in Prime Minister. About 10,000 people always attend. Most people don't wear masks, and there is no social distancing. Most people are young. There are some more mature people in attendance, there's no question. Protest organizers claim that these Jerusalem protests are deliberately kept small to 10,000. They assert that every Saturday night throughout the country, there are other small protests taking place around Israel. They say that the number of Saturday night protesters throughout the country totals, get this number, 260,000 protesters. That's unbelievable if that's true. The protests began months ago, and now there seems to be a groundswell. Polls show that Netanyahu is slipping. I just mentioned that in the cartoons. He is facing challenges from his right-wing flank. His political future is anything but secure right now. The U.S. warned Turkey that there will be potentially serious consequences if they activate the S-400 Russian anti-aircraft, anti-missile systems that they purchased and received from Russia. The consequences will be a breakdown of the relations between the United States and Turkey. It will also mean a breakdown of the relations between NATO and Turkey. Using Russian weapons is a clear violation of NATO membership. The United States could recommend that NATO oust Turkey. That is probably what's going to happen. The U.S. State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortagus said, and here I'm quoting her, "If confirmed, we would condemn in the strongest terms the S-400 test missiles launch as incompatible with Turkey's responsibilities as a NATO ally and strategic partner with the United States," unquote. Turkey is pushing the envelope. Erdogan and his government is flirting with Russia and Iran, and they are testing the United States and NATO to see how they will respond and how serious the response will be. Turkey is betting that NATO will not care and that they will get the best of both NATO and Russia. I think Turkey is underestimating both NATO and the United States. Iran has confirmed that on 2 consecutive days, they were targeted by a computer hack They said that the two targets were attacked and that in order to make certain that everything is safe, they took all their other offices off the grid. Since Stuxnet, Iran has made their systems independent and they've not really been on the internet. Everything's an internal system. Everything is internal and that saves them. But nonetheless, the hackers were able to get in. This attack was very effective. They did not hide it from the public. The Iranian media, though, covered it and covered the two agencies that were attacked, including the ports. If I were managing a cyber attack against Iran, I would use these small attacks on the agencies as a ploy. I would watch as Iran shut down and rebooted several of what would be more significant targets, and maybe even inject spyware and other things as they upgraded, as they uploaded, as they booted. Whatever attacked Iran is highly sophisticated, and no doubt it will attack them again. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the 1961 movie Judgment at Nuremberg won 3 Academy Awards? The movie addressed the issue and Caption addressed earlier in the show, that the law can be evil, immoral, wrong. The Nazis disenfranchised the Jews, took away their property, rounded them up, and deported them, all legally. But what happens when the law is immoral? What happens when the law is wrong? How do you deal with judges whose job it is to rule on immoral laws?
Truth.
That's what this movie, which starred some of the biggest names in Hollywood, Spencer Tracy, Burt Lancaster, Richard Widmark, Maximilian Schell, Werner Klepper, Marlene Dietrich,
My husband was a military man.
Judy Garland, William Shatner,
There was nothing like you're trying to make it sound.
and Montgomery Clift. That was what the movie was all about. It was 179 minutes long. It's 3 hours. Judgment at Nuremberg is a classic, truly a classic. It was entertainment, but it was more than that. It dealt with the essential questions and educated the masses about good and evil. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud next week again on JBS.